Hi, and welcome to today's episode. I think you're going to really like my conversation with MSNBC's Ali Velshi, who I have known since he was CNN's Ali Velshi. I'm Pete Dominick, and it's time to stand up with me right now. Stand up. Hello there, friends. I hope to see you tonight at our Stand Up with Pete Dominick Happy Hour Hangout. Well, that's what I've been calling it since March 2020 that we began doing this, going on 3.5 years now, and we always have a great time. There's usually 50 or 60 people there. We go for like 3 hours sometimes, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's hangout because, I don't know, I'm feeling just kind of disconnected, a little bit lonely over the past week, so I always look forward to seeing folks at the Hangout. That is tonight at 8 p.m. If you are a stand-up subscriber for as little as $5 a month, you can join us and be a part of the hang where everybody is welcome. So I hope to see you tonight at 8 East. Look for the link in your email if you're a subscriber. If you're not getting it, let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com and I will send it to you. Also, I will be with J.L. Cauvin co-headlining City Winery in Pittsburgh on October 11th. So if you're in and around that area of PA, Western PA, maybe you'll come out to the show. We should have a good time. And my final little plug or note is that you got to buy Kevin Richburg's honey. Kevin, a longtime listener of the show, always hangs out with us on Thursday nights. I'm sure he'll be there tonight. I hope at least. And many of you have bought his sweet honey. And I've seen some of you posting saying it's the best honey that you've ever had. So if you want to get it, you can find a link in the show notes. He still has some left. It's $20, and you should get a jar of it because it is absolutely delicious. Kevin is one of the best guys I've ever met in my life. He needs the money, and you need the honey. So let's go, folks. There's still a few left, and I really want him to sell out of this honey. So get some or get more. Go to SlatehillEdibleForest.com or just find that link in the show notes. I promise you won't be sorry. Neither will your mouth or your soul, because when you have a spoonful of it, it's just so delicious. Okay, well, time for some news, which I do Monday through Thursday here on the show during this segment. I don't know what to say about the horrific floods that killed thousands of people in Libya. I don't know how to really talk about it or mention it or think about it. It's such a horrible, awful nightmare of a situation. More than 5,000 people were killed there after torrential rains caused 2 dams to burst near a coastal city, destroying much of the city and carrying entire neighborhoods into the sea. When I read that, I just couldn't fathom the horror, and I'm going to continue to try not to, but I got to mention it. It's a thing that's affecting, I feel like, the energy of the universe. It can't not, in my mind, and I don't know. I'll bring it up at tonight's Hangout as a try to figure out how to talk about these kinds of things here in the podcast or how news should handle them. But I did want to mention that I'm paying attention to it. It's a terrible situation there in Libya, in Western Libya specifically, where the government is really screwed up and corrupt, and a very hard time getting relief to that area. And I just don't know what else to say about that right now. They captured that guy in Pennsylvania, which I didn't pay that much attention to, but it was, creating headlines for days. A convicted murderer who crab walked out of the prison. Did you see that? Where he just walked up the wall, basically, with his feet on one side, his hands on the other side. Spent 2 weeks hiding in the woods, fields. He was captured, ending a manhunt, and he was wearing a Philadelphia Eagles hoodie, which I think is the funniest part of all of this. Also, yesterday, Mitt Romney said he'll retire, making some big headlines. He suggested that both Donald Trump and President Biden were also too old and probably should follow his lead, arguing that neither was effectively leading their party to confront the critical challenges the nation faces. And I agree with him. And while we're on the topic, maybe Mitch McConnell, who's 81, Dianne Feinstein's 90, Chuck Grassley, 89, 17 other members of Congress who are over 80, maybe they could do us a solid and step aside So you can yell at me if you want, but those are my feelings on that. Yesterday, a federal judge denied Mark Meadows' request to pause proceedings in the Fulton County case, the Georgia case, while he appealed the ruling. That was pretty big news. A federal judge refused to give President Trump permission to discuss classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, where he's already mishandled documents. And the other story that I'm paid attention to for about 10 seconds yesterday was the unveiling of the mummified alien bodies in front of Mexico's Congress. I first learned of this when I saw a tweet from Opie and Anthony, who used to host a show on Sirius XM, where he basically shared the news from some Pakistani weather Twitter account and insinuated that mainstream news was not paying attention to it for any reason. He's like, oh, no big deal here. Just some mummified alien bodies, nothing to see. Let's just pay attention to other news. And I was like, yeah, there isn't anything to see because there's no way those are mummified alien bodies. Nothing about me believes that that's the case. I would love for that to be the case. That would be awesome. And I just knew that it wasn't true because it wasn't being reported in mainstream media. Not everything is a conspiracy. I mean, the bottom line is that if something is going to generate clicks, then major media outlets, news outlets that are, quote, respectable corporate mainstream outlets from New York Times to CNN to CBS or the rest of the networks, the Washington Post, you'd think that they wouldn't report on it for the clicks? Are you kidding me? I mean, they absolutely will and would. And if they're not, then it generally means, in my mind at least, that it's probably not worth pursuing as much when it's something sensational like that. Okay, I mean, I'm sure we can give plenty of examples where mainstream news isn't covering something that they should be covering. For sure we can. But one of these sensational alien stories, I don't think so. That's my take. I'd love to hear yours. But I'm alone in my shed, and it's not live, so you'll have to tell me any number of other ways. And finally, I just wanted to mention, of course, we're going to continue to hear about impeachment. But at this point, it would seem that Democrats and progressives, liberal pundits, etc., are kind of excited about it because they mostly seem to think that this is going to hurt Republicans and be a distraction for them and help Joe Biden. At least that's the perception of a lot of people who I like, read, and trust, including Ali Velshi. He mentions that today on the show. We talked a lot about impeachment. And here's a great example of that with Crazy James Carville talking to CNN's Caitlin Collins, predicting Democrats on the committee investigating Biden will eat alive the Republicans leading the charge. He mocked two of those Republicans, James Comer and Jim Jordan, as borderline stupid. And I'm here for it.
Well, my honest opinion is the people they have leading it are not very smart. In fact, they're borderline stupid. I mean, James Comer or Jim Jordan. And the people in the House that are going to be on this committee, like Dan Goldman, Delegate Plaskett, I think is from Virgin Islands, Jamie Raskin, these are very smart people. I don't think the White House needs to worry too much about this and let these congressional Democrats who are whip smart are just going to eat these people alive. I so want them to do this. I can't tell you how much I want them to do this. This is a very stupid
You want them to
idea.
do the impeachment? What do you mean?
I want them to hold hearings.
Why do you think it's a stupid
I want them
idea?
to hold hearings, and I want to let people, the American public, see how non-existent a case is. The president did anything wrong, and I want our people who are quite effective lawyers to get them on cross-examination and do what they're going to do and make fools out of them.
There's some polling from CNN and from others as well about, even though, as you know, we just talked about the congressman, there's no direct evidence tying President Biden to benefiting from this. 61% of people do think that he was involved. There's other numbers of people who have questions about it. Do you not think that those hearings could raise those numbers, could change that? What's your sense?
I think it would change it. I think it would drive it down because the public would pay attention to the hearings and they would see front and center how vapid and useless this entire endeavor is when it comes to the president doing anything wrong. I mean, how much more can you embarrass Hunter Biden?
I got to agree with James Carville there. And that's a final good point there. How much more can you embarrass Hunter Biden? That's where if there's any damage, it's to Hunter Biden more than anybody else. Here's another clip. I love this one. This is Congressman Jared Moskowitz. I'm a big fan. He's a Democrat from Florida, a freshman. This is his first term, I believe. He went after Republicans during a committee hearing on Wednesday over their impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden, tearing into allegations levied at Biden by pointing to the GOP's purported double standard regarding Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
We sit here, we hear our colleagues bring up certain things like, oh, the Biden family took money from a foreign entity, right? And it's just like, well, really? I mean, do they really not know that Jared Kushner took $2 billion from the Saudis? I mean, by the way, they go on Twitter and blame the Saudis for 9/11. But then Jared Kushner, who, by the way, was not a wealth expert before he worked in the White House, nor was he a Middle East expert before he worked there, gets $2 billion from the Saudis, and they don't have any questions. And I just think that the American people recognize that they have no credibility. It's why the stuff they've been selling in this committee for 9 months has not translated, which is why they got to start it all over again. You don't have any credibility when you only want to look at one side of the coin.
All right, that's Jared Moskowitz, Democrat from Florida. Now let's go to Daniel Goldman, who is a Democrat from New York. And, well, I don't need to say anything. I think it's self-explanatory. Take it away, Congressman.
And so why are we going to spend the next few months on a bogus and sham impeachment inquiry? Because Donald Trump wants them to. And Donald Trump has been calling them and urging them to do it because he was impeached twice. One of those impeachments of Donald Trump was because he tried to extort the president of Ukraine to investigate Hunter Biden. The president of Ukraine refused. Unfortunately, House Republicans don't have the spine that President Zelensky has, and they are now doing Donald Trump's bidding.
All right. There you go, Daniel Goldman. Again, saying that in a committee hearing to Republicans' faces, which begs the question how often they all get together on the weekends, which I think is not at all. All right, well, there's a lot more news. Always welcome you to send me the stories that you're paying attention to, and many of you do, but keep it coming. standupwithpete@gmail.com. I'm sorry if I haven't gotten to your email, back to your emails, by the way. I read pretty much all of them, rest assured, and feel guilt. I carry guilt that I don't get back to listener email all the time, and I really should set aside more time to do that every day. But I very much appreciate your correspondence, so keep it coming. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Keep those vitamin N nature photos coming, too. Get outside, take photos, make sure there's no man-made objects in them, send them to me, and then I will include your photos in the listener email. Just a fun little thing to start your day with. But that's all the news I've got for you today. Let's get to my guest, shall we? Had an awesome conversation with my friend Ali Velshi, which I do a few times a year here on the show. I love talking to Velshi about, well, almost anything, but we talked about all the issues that he is covering on his shows, where he appears all over MSNBC. You can see him on Friday nights at the Last Word, in the Last Word time slot. He sits in every Friday night for Lawrence O'Donnell. Then you can see him Saturdays and Sundays from 10 to noon East, hosting his show, Velshi. He's also got a podcast called The Banned Book Club, where he interviews authors and talks about specific books that are being banned. It's really very good. He's excellent on social media. You should follow him there, and you can get the new book that he has written an intro, edited, and introduced, the Trump indictments, the 91 counts against the former president of the United States, all aggregated in this shocking narrative put together in the book. To pre-order that now. Ladies and gentlemen, very excited to bring him to you. I love this man, at Ali Velshi, joining Stand Up right now.
Yeah, looks like you're in 30 Rock.
I am. This is my office. I've tried to make it look as big as possible. So it looks like an airplane bathroom.
So cool. I love it. You're in the city. You're in 30 Rock, a legendary. Does it ever get old to go in that building? Whenever I go in that building, I feel like, oh, this is pretty cool because of all its history.
Well, I'm going to get in trouble for somebody for saying this. It gets old between Thanksgiving and Christmas because 9 million people come here to see a tree.
Yes.
And my general view is that if you like trees, I'm not sure Midtown Manhattan's your spot, but whatever.
Yes,
it must be really exciting. You're right by the skating rink and the tree. And all that. It's like it's not. You
cannot. I used to, as you know, I used to work on the same block, a Sirius XM. You cannot move.
Cannot move
physically.
And all of humanity is here, and I love humanity. Like to the extent that I like the humans, it's great. But when you're trying to get in and out of work, if you're having a nice time, you're going to FAO Schwartz, and you want to see the tree, and you want to skate, you want to have hot chocolate. Yeah. It's fantastic. If you're actually trying to get in and out of work, it's hell.
Other than the high season, it's a great place to be.
Yeah, but otherwise, this is the heart of Manhattan, the heart of media, the media world in New York. Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's a beautiful old building, 75, 80 years old or something, NBC. Some of the floors and offices seem like they're 75 or 80 years old. But most places are nice like this. And
it looks like you. It looks like you have an old radiator and a cotton gin in your office. Is that right? Is that a printing press?
But I do have an old typewriter, so
it is an old. Are you in the past? Oh, that's just how you decorate. Well, you are the center of media, Ali Velshi, so we're very excited that you're talking to me. First of all, a shout out to Ken Zatz, who I hike with every Wednesday, and I said I've got to go because I'm talking to Ali Velshi, and Ken lit up. He never, I never drop a name on him where he goes, will you tell him I love him? And then also the longtime listener who you might know from Twitter, she's one of those amazing Twitter people that's supportive and certainly loves your work, Tina Winsett, at TM Winsett. She's like, I'm jealous that you get to talk to Velshi. So I don't know. What do you want to say to Ken and Tina?
Well, thank you, first of all, for letting me take Pete away from the hike. And Tina, thank you as well for your compliment. No reason to be jealous. I'm equal opportunity. I like the idea that I think over all the years that we've known each other, Pete, that my viewers should think that we all have a relationship, right? That we all are friends. And that's how I feel. I'm here in service of my viewers. And when they tell me thanks for doing this, it's like, okay, that means my job was well done.
I think that's why people feel the way they feel about you, is because I think that when you say that relationship, I think at minimum, I'm speaking for you, maybe for myself, well, certainly for myself, what you want in the relationship is trust. And I think that you have built trust over your entire career with your audience.
I hope so. They indulge me a lot. Like I do. I end up doing things on TV where someone might say, that might not have rated that well. That seemed a little bit like you went a little farther into a topic than maybe you were interested in. And it always works because the viewer has decided, those who like me have decided, hey, we're sticking with this guy. He tells interesting stories and may not be exactly the stuff they'd have chosen. We end up on a nice journey together.
I think a lot of what you do, even in the primetime hours, they're giving seemingly, I don't know how much it's changed over your career from CNN to MSNBC, how long the segments are, but certainly on your weekend show that you host, 10 to noon. I don't know if it's different on Fridays, and last word. You seem to get a lot of time to dig into things. And I think that's one of the main reasons I like to read long form investigative journalism. I like to hear the details and the granularity. That's the world I want to live in.
That's what we're trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do on cable. And I will say all my executive producers and colleagues and segment producers and bosses all indulge me in that. They're like, you know what? If you're that passionate about it, you think you've got enough time or you can sustain the time to do the story, you want to take 2 blocks to do it, take 2 blocks to do it. There's some topics we take 3 blocks to do because they're really complicated. I'll set it up for a block without a guest, and then I'll talk with 1 or 2 guests over 2 more blocks. Because if you're talking about things, recently I've been talking about the 14th Amendment, Section 3, about whether Donald Trump's qualified to hold the presidency or various things. You can't compress everything into a 5-minute segment. Right. That's just the way it goes. Some things you can do very nicely in 5 minutes. Some things you can't.
Well, that's one of the things I want to ask you about. Whenever I talk to you, one of the great things is you can talk about all these issues because you cover them and you talk to all the experts like I do. The difference is you remember the things and then you can talk about them, where I'm like, what? I know I just talked about climate, but what are the statistics? You, however, are one of those I call them assholes that remember things. And so you test well in school and you're considered smarter than the rest simply because you remember the things that you read and learned. And I don't. And you're not better than me.
Well, I will tell you, I mean, I hope my wife isn't listening to this, because if she hears you saying I remember everything, that's going to cause a lot of tension at home, because she'll tell me something. I told you that a lot yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like, I totally don't remember. It's like, I've given up saying you didn't tell me, because she's probably right. She probably did tell me. And then I forgot.
I think
moved into you remember the things that you seem to want to remember, as opposed to the errands that I ask you to undertake.
I think you just need a live camera on your marriage to hold you accountable, because that's why you know that you're going to go out in front of thousands.
I can play it back, and then I'm not even worried about being held accountable. It's like, okay, you know what, let me just play back everything we said yesterday and make sure that the checklist is done. I did the things that I was supposed to do. Yeah.
So because you remember all these things, let's get into whatever you remember from talking to several experts about this 14th Amendment possibility. But let me make it short and sweet, because I think that based on watching a lot of your stuff and reading, different columns about it and I don't think we're ever going to see one Secretary of State prevent Donald Trump from being on the ballot, even though it would seem completely right to do so. The arguments seem to all be there, but in the end, I don't think they do. Do you, based on everybody you've talked to, including some secretaries of state? What
I did this morning, I don't know if you know this, I read documents a lot, right? So I podcast all the indictments. So here's my indictments. This is the January 6th indictment, my personal copy. This is the, what is this one? This is the
Georgia election.
This is the Georgia election one. This is the Manhattan indictment, and this is the Mar-a-Lago indictment, right? So I read them all, and I read them as podcasts so that people can listen to them. And there's some value to just reading documents and understanding them. So this morning, just before talking to you, I read the Constitution of the United States as a podcast. Because if you read Section 14, Amendment 14, Section 3, it says this, that if you swore an oath to the United States, and I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've had to swear an oath to the United States. I have because I'm a naturalized citizen. So I would count. The 14th Amendment would apply to me, that having sworn an oath to the Constitution, if I engage in insurrection or rebellion against the United States of America, I'm not entitled to hold any elected office, state, federal, military at all. Right? So this is interesting. It applies to Donald Trump. It applies to me. Doesn't apply to you. Now, there's no mechanism for fixing it. Section 5 of that same clause says Congress can make the laws to enforce that, but Congress has done no such thing at the moment. So it stands to the Secretary of States who say, Pete Dominick wants to run for president. Ali Velshi wants to run for president. Are you 35 years of age? Yes. Have you lived in the United States for 14 years? Yes. Are you naturalized born? I'm not. You are. So I'd be disqualified just on the checklist. I wouldn't make it onto the ballot. Well, the 14th Amendment, Section 3, some are arguing should be part of the checklist. If you engage in an insurrection after having sworn an oath to the United States Constitution, you're not qualified. But to your point, it's got to go through the courts. So Wisconsin and Colorado are test cases at the moment. But let's say a Colorado judge says, yeah, he's not entitled to be on the ballot, Donald Trump. Then it goes to an appellate court. Then it goes to the Supreme Court. And I am not entirely sure that this particular Supreme Court and its composition will come to the conclusion that Donald Trump is disqualified. Why? Because it says if you have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion or have given aid and comfort to those who have. And the Supreme Court, I would believe, would say there's no proof. Till these cases are done, an impeachment is a political process. The January 6th committee is a political process. Other people have been charged. The Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers have been charged and convicted. Donald Trump hasn't yet. So if Donald Trump is convicted, and if he's convicted not of something that feels like insurrection, which is not clear, but most of these charges are not about insurrection,
right?
Then there's a chance. I would say, generally speaking, otherwise, chances are low.
Right. I agree. I appreciate all the analysis of it. It's very interesting and important. Anytime we're talking about the Constitution, no matter your interpretation, I think we're having an important conversation, but I just don't see that happening. And I wanted to get your take on it. Now, you mentioned impeachments, and that is another thing I wanted to ask you about. Yeah. So the quick take my favorite hot, quick take, I forget who it was, but yesterday was the reason why Republicans are trying to impeach President Joe Biden is because Trump told them to. And the reason is because he lost. 100%. So because Trump lost, he wants them, and he keeps scores. He thinks this guy should be impeached as well, because he got impeached. He's ordering it. And Kevin McCarthy's got enough people in the House that are basically forcing him to do it. Otherwise, I don't think he would do it. But
not near enough people to actually get it done. Right.
Right. Not even in the House Republican caucus. Right.
The House Republican caucus. Right. I mean, in order to be impeached by the House, you have to have a majority vote. Now, he's got about 20 people, I think, who are, I call the chaos caucus, the ones who kind of held him hostage and made him do 15 rounds before he became speaker. He has almost exactly that many Republicans who won in districts that Joe Biden won in, right? So Republicans who won in otherwise Democratic districts. They want no part of that. Those 18 want no part of that. Most of them are on the record of saying they don't think this is a legitimate exercise. There are more than that 18 who don't want to be involved in this because they think it's a distraction from the things that when you're running for election, your constituents want to know that you've been involved in doing. Right. At the moment, the track record for Republicans is nearly breaching the debt limit, possibly shutting the government down, and moving toward the impeachment of Joe Biden. Most people are not worried about that stuff. Most people don't want their elected representatives whose salaries they pay doing that. Right. There are real issues in the world that we need to discuss. Wages, labor, healthcare, inflation, the climate, all that kind of stuff. Ukraine, whatever. You know what I mean? This is nonsense. And so there are a whole bunch of Republicans. They're not going to get past go because not a single Democrat will vote for this. And 18 to 20 Republicans won't vote for it. How many votes can McCarthy lose? 5. That's it.
Right.
So this is a non-starter. So on one hand, it feels like McCarthy caved. On the other hand, McCarthy, maybe after 15 efforts to become speaker, may have learned how to count votes. So he may say, this costs me nothing. I say we're going to go for an impeachment hearing. And in the end, it won't happen anyway. And I can say that I did it. Either way, it does not make Kevin McCarthy look like a particularly good or strong leader. But it's a non-starter.
I'm hearing a lot of analysis from a lot of smart people. Most say I don't disagree because maybe I'm a little cynical about what impeachment, these efforts mean for the Republican Party's hopes for its brand. And a lot of people are saying it's going them badly in November, and they point to the Clinton impeachment, and that hurt Republicans is, I guess, the consensus. But I'm old enough to have covered the Obama administration, where Clinton was Secretary of State, where they grilled her over and over on fraudulent investigations. I believe, and I think a lot of other people do, that did damage her. You repeat a lie over and over. You have all these hearings and say that the laptop from hell enough times. So I also think it's fair to say this could hurt Biden, but I haven't heard anybody I respect.
I agree. The flip side of that is how do you hurt Biden? He is. I've never seen a president do more and not move the needle in terms of popularity. Right? He's still stuck in the same place.
Yeah.
Joe Biden might be a guy who in 20 years we talk about having brought America's greatest adversary to its knees in Russia, who took NATO, which was Humpty Dumpty, pieced it together and put it back on top of the wall again as the leading military alliance in the world, who's gone around the world walking this remarkable tight line with India and Israel and China and in Asia, with sophisticated foreign policy. It's not moving the needle one bit. So that's the bad news for Joe Biden. Nothing's moving the needle for him. The good news for Joe Biden is nothing's moving the needle for him. Right. So I don't really know that this injures him all that much. But yeah, two things can happen. One is there's this drumbeat of the Biden crime family and blah, 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 blah. And people start to think about it and say, I don't want the hassle. The other side is there's this drumbeat of the Biden crime family. And anybody who reads anything says there's no Biden crime family. And this seems like a waste of everybody's time. Right. I have no idea how this plays out. I can never tell. But you're right. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. Well,
I wonder what you think. A lot of how it plays out has to do with how the media handles it. I don't think anybody's going to question you on how you're going to handle this in media, who you talk to, who you quote platform, and the things that you say. Jen Rubin, who I think joins you regularly of Washington Post, she tweeted yesterday about the impeachment. She said the reckless, unfounded impeachment and shutdown are a test for the mainstream political media. Will they avoid both siderism and place Republicans under a microscope? I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt it. It's not the White House says there's no evidence. It's there's no evidence. It's not. There are two sides at a standoff of the government funding. It's Republicans are reneging on the deal during the debt negotiations. Time for truth-telling, not fake, distorted balance. What will you do, Velshi?
Yeah, no, there's no both sides about this. There was no both sides about Donald Trump's impeachment either. I mean, these things don't have two sides. Lots of things have two sides with people with whom my viewers do not agree, right? This 14th Amendment thing, it's definitely worthy of a lot of discussion. Minimum wage, healthcare has two sides. Climate doesn't really have two sides. Vivek Ramaswamy says it's a climate hoax. The climate agenda is a hoax.
But the solutions to it, the solutions have many sides. Solutions have many sides.
Priorities on climate have many sides. This isn't one of them. There is nothing demonstrable that would lead to the idea that President Biden should be impeached, let alone censured, right? We've got this weird thing where we've skipped entirely over censuring someone who you don't like or might have done something wrong. We're going right to impeachment. Zero evidence about Alejandro Mayorkas, who they also want to impeach. Impeach has become the thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene says that far-right Republicans latch on to. It's cheapened the word. So, I think Jen Rubin's entirely correct. This is just nonsense. And I will say, I'm a pretty liberal guy. I grew up liberal, small L liberal. I'm not the most liberal guy in the world. I think there is a real opportunity for Republicans in this country. I think there's a real need for there to be a real conservative party and a Republican Party that argues on the merits for certain things that I wouldn't agree with, but that we can debate. You can't have this debate with anybody. There's nobody I can debate healthcare with. There's nobody I can debate minimum wage with. There's nobody I can debate climate solutions with in the Republican Party because it's all BS like this.
Well, you say that, and Tina told me to ask you the question that where was it? She's like, you have some Republicans on and you try to have, but you can't get, can you get many of them on? Like what happens when you try to, do you invite and do you be concerned about platforming certain voices like, say, a Matt Gaetz, who was on CNN last night, and Abby Phillips did the best job.
Election deniers do not get on my show under any circumstances, unless they wish to use that opportunity to recant their election denial, because they are just liars. Liars don't get on my show. If you're not a liar, if you're a good faith operative, and I do have them, and I can get pretty much any of those Republicans I talked about who are in these districts. I can get a lot of other Republicans on too. But if you were one of those Republicans who voted not to certify the election, you're not making it on my show.
Good. I love that rule. I think it's absolutely morally clear as to the threshold for when somebody gets to come on, even if we think someone's being dishonest throughout their career.
You can disagree with everything about me, and you can hate me, and you'll get on my show. You can't be a liar about anything. Like, same thing with abortion. You want to discuss your view on abortion versus mine or my viewer's view? I'm happy to have any of that discussion, but it has to be a good faith argument. That's the distinction. Yeah. People have become bad faith in terms of their arguments. They're just there to ride the bull for as long as a TV segment is, to show that they owned me on TV. Not looking for that. I'm definitely looking for people who are smarter than me, who hold views that I don't hold, who can debate it with me and discuss it with me any time of day. I will take that on my show. But if you're going to just lie somewhere else.
I love it. I might even have a less of a threshold in that I know you're lying about some things. I know you're not telling the truth, but I draw the line at, say, climate, vaccines, and election.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree that maybe people don't tell the full truth about everything all the time, and I'm okay with that. I don't need to. But when it comes to democracy and when it comes to existential things, right? Yeah. Democracy is existential for us. Yeah. Climate is existential for us. Guns and shooting people are existential to us, right? Things that are existential, I'm not looking for liars on. If it's stuff on the margins, I'm not as concerned.
And you're talking mainly about, powerful people and politicians, not like necessarily some common.
Well, I go out on the road, as you know, and I talk to groups of people. That standard is not held to regular people and their views, because they may have been duped. They may have been subject to misinformation. That's fine. I mean, I'm a big First Amendment guy. You have every right to have your opinion about everything. If you are in a position of authority and you are manipulating people, you don't get to use my show as your platform.
Right. I love it. I love that rule, and I agree with it. And another reason why I think you have a lot of credibility. I wanted to know your thoughts on Elon Musk and Twitter and how it's affected you and how you're seeing it play out, because I feel like part of the issue, and I wanted to ask you specifically about I don't know about this reporting now with Walter Isaacson. I'm pretty confused. I know him. I've interviewed him. I thought he had a lot of credibility, and he's like walking back a quote in his book about Musk's intervention on behalf of Russia over Starlink. My point is, you reported from Ukraine. Yeah. You understand these people and this issue, and from all sides. You've talked to so many historians, much less foreign policy experts, leaders, and so on. And to see Elon Musk saying what he says about Russia. Yesterday, Putin honored him saying what he says about China. And then, doing what he does at Twitter. I mean, and now with the ADL, I mean, I guess my question is, what do you think of the role that he's played in our society and our culture, social media, and now wars? How
much time do we have? Because I got a lot of views on this. First of all, I everybody who's read anything about Elon Musk and Starlink should read Ann Applebaum's column that's just come out, because she has brought this all together. She's obviously an expert on totalitarianism and communism in Eastern Europe and all that. And I used her a lot. And she has written a comment about how the effect that Russia is having on people and their decision making, people who are influential. So put that aside for a second.
Great.
Walter was my boss at CNN when I first joined CNN.
That's right, yeah.
22 years ago or something. And I would recommend to most people, don't ever agree to an interview with Walter Isaacson, and don't ever agree to let him write your book, because he'll be thorough and all the information will come out. And people are learning one way or the other through Walter Isaacson's book that Elon Musk he's not just an emperor has no clothes. He's an emperor who's going to destroy the world naked. And the hardest part about this for me is that I used to think that Elon Musk was like a modern day Leonardo da Vinci, right? I thought this guy was, and I think he still is. I think he's an actual genius. I think he thinks outside the box when he talks about settling on Mars and rocket ships. He's done more to advance commercial space than anyone else, and electric cars. The guy is an actual genius. But as Walter Isaacson describes him, he's a man-child. He's got all sorts of issues that need to be worked out between him and his therapist, and he's letting them play out in the real world, which has actually an effect on democracy, right? Twitter was a broken place. It needed to be fixed, but he didn't want to fix it. He's got no sense of sophistication about what X or Twitter actually should be and what role it should play in the world. He doesn't understand something as simple as the First Amendment and what role private corporations have. He did change the world by putting Starlink up there and giving Ukrainians access to satellite communication. And then he didn't. I think he is substantially more dangerous than most people understand. And I will say, I think most of what you're going to read from Walter Isaacson will confirm the fact that he's, like a lot of these people, these prodigies, he's dangerous. He needs to do some work to fix himself. I think he needs to go on a retreat. And, the problem with these tech bros, they go and they have ayahuasca and they think they've discovered the world. He really needs to take some real time and think about who he is and how he can take that amazing brain of his and fix the world. He has gone from actually fixing the world, which he was doing with space and he was doing with electric cars, into actively breaking the world. And history will judge him very poorly, although he's a young man. He's younger than we are. And he has an opportunity to turn that around and say, you know what, I'm smart. I'm going to do good things. But right now he's doing bad things.
I feel like you might get too much credit for that genius, but I won't belabor that. I just want to ask you if you agree with him when he says, I'm paraphrasing, one of the greatest threats to humanity populating other planets is the woke mind virus. Do you think the woke mind virus is a great threat?
No. And, Vivek Ramaswamy talked about the Maui fire being about having diversity programs. Nobody who's woke uses the word woke, first of all, right? Like my daughter, who I think would fall into that category, tells me all the time, like, nobody uses the word woke. It's not a thing. They are people who believe that it's worth, as human beings, using the sophistication and the brain power we have to create a more inclusive society. That's it. What do we used to call politically correct back in the days? Right. It's so old. It's so out of date to be that guy, right, who doesn't want to say certain things to people. It just doesn't matter. It costs us nothing. I don't waste one brain cell on people's pronouns. Whatever you want to be called, you are going to be called by me. Like that's all there is. It might take me a few takes to get it right, but not my problem. Like that's not where I'm investing my energy in life, in making determinations about you and your identity and fairness and all that kind of stuff. It's such BS, Pete. Here's the part that's not BS. There's a great author. You probably know her, Ali Hochschild. She's a professor at Berkeley. She wrote a book called Strangers Among Us, in which, this is pre-Trump, she went to the bayou of Louisiana and she talked to a lot of people who were, self-described Rush Limbaugh fans. They've got beef. People have beef in America. They've got beef about their employment, about their wages, about the fact that they look out there and they see corporate profitability being the highest it's ever been, and stock markets the highest they've ever been, and GDP being the highest they've ever been. And they don't see that in their lives. And they're right. And they're right to be mad at someone. And what they should be mad at is their governments and government policy about trade and taxation and things like that. But people have taken advantage of that and made them mad at Jews and black people and immigrants and refugees and Asians and women and gay people and trans people. Most people who don't like trans people never met a trans person in their life, first of all. Most people who ban books have never read the books that they're banning. Moms for Liberty don't read the books that they ban. That's my point. People have reasons to feel frustrated about where they are in terms of their livelihood and their prosperity. We need to be honest with them about where they should focus those energies. And they focus those energies by being involved in your school board, running for office, running for city council, running for state house, running for Congress, supporting people, making sure you're registered to vote, supporting local news where they hold people to account. That's how you fix that. But that's hard. That takes work, Pete. It's much more easy to be mad at the gays and mad at the Jews and mad at the blacks. And that's what this is.
By the way, did you hear what Tim Scott said yesterday? The people that are accusing him of being gay are just using that instead of saying that he's black. Did you hear that quote?
I did. And I
was like,
I wish he had a lane, but I like him. And I will say I'm with him on the idea that I'm not sure the media should be engaging in too much conversation about who's gay and who's not, right? Like it's got a McCarthyism thing.
I disagree with you because I interviewed Michelangelo Signorelli and he's been on this beat forever. So I agree with you overwhelmingly, except for when a policymaker is anti-gay in their policies and they're saying, and they themselves are gay, like, do whatever you want. You should be able to guard your privacy. But as long as you're taking my freedom and you're actually
distinction. That's an important distinction. Wherever you are, whoever you are on the spectrum, whether it's gender, sexuality, color, whatever the case is, that's right. That if you are working toward taking someone else's rights away or curtailing those rights or not offering them the same rights as everyone else
would be
entitled to, then that's a relevant piece of information.
It would be like so many male Republican, especially, or any male policymaker who's anti-abortion who just paid for his mistress's abortion. Like, that's the exact same thing. Like, we should know that you did that because you're making
Georgia who was running. That's right. That's relevant. That's relevant information. I'm glad that that was available to you. This thing that you're trying to not make available to other people was available to you when you needed to avail yourself of it.
The opposite of the woke mind virus, or if you're really concerned about speech, then the biggest concern should be the banning of books. You host
100%
the banned book club. Right. Like, how do you explain how?
Pete, the biggest fear that parents have about school and the biggest fear that kids have about school today is getting shot at school. That's literally the biggest risk.
That is not hyperbolic. It is probably true of almost every student.
Never killed anybody, and we're having the wrong argument here. If you really are about parental rights, and I am too, by the way, I think that parents should have all the input into what their kids read. My argument is that the parents should have the input. It should not be given to the government. And by the government, I mean the school, the public school system, the school board, the city council, the county, or the state. That's your right to determine what your children read. And if you don't want them, it's a broad book of, you can't see it in the shop, but these are all my banned books here because I have this banned book club. And there are things in there that a young child shouldn't read. There are things in there that a parent may want to curate. There are things in there they may want to have read to them with their teachers who can curate it with them. There are things in there where you want to say, hey, my kid really liked this. What else can you recommend? That's the job of a librarian. But it's your choice, your and your child's choice. And as an adult, it's my choice to make the determination as to what I read. And by the way, this goes for Mein Kampf, and it goes for the Protocol of the Elders of Zion, because if I'm a student of anti-Semitism or racism or ethnic cleansing or the Holocaust, I need these documents. I need to be able to read them. But as a grown up, I can curate I have critical thinking. I have a brain. Let our brains govern what we read, not our school boards.
I will say your defense of this has gone too far. I wasn't going to say the Mein Kampf poster in your office seems too much, Velshi. It seems like that's a little bit. The
only reason there'd be one is to say ban. The government is not in a position to ban anybody's books. Now, governments, I have a strong view. America doesn't do this. Canada does. Germany does. I have a strong view about what you can ban in terms of political activity that is hateful.
Yeah.
And a lot of American First Amendment people would disagree with that. But in Canada and Germany, you cannot openly be a Holocaust denier, for instance. Some would say that's a violation of free speech.
Or fly a swastika flag.
Books are available. Yeah. And that's books are once we start banning books, Pete, it's game over. Let me just tell you a little story. My parents, as you know, were anti-apartheid activists from South Africa. When I started the banned book club, my father texts me every time I do a show.
Love it.
He texted me to say he left South Africa when he was 25 years old. He didn't even know public libraries existed.
Wow.
Because it didn't exist for him.
Yeah.
For brown people and black people in South Africa, there were no public libraries. There were no school libraries. Didn't even have libraries. That's how apartheid did that to keep people ignorant. Right? If you're a black person and you looked up in the black dictionary, which was different from the white dictionary, what black people were, the description was manual laborer. Right? The dictionary for black people was designed for people to be gardeners, house cleaners, mine workers, laborers, drivers. Right? They were educated in Afrikaans, not English, because nobody else in the world spoke Afrikaans. So the point is you wouldn't travel anywhere. You wouldn't get out anywhere. Right? It's all designed to keep people ignorant. In antebellum America, they did not let black people read. Why? Because if you read, you get ideas. You develop critical thinking skills. And this is why we cannot let this go down any road whatsoever. We must give no quarter whatsoever to book banners.
Things have changed, and you're doing such a great work, better than anybody in media on that and talking about that. But it's also so outrageous to me. I am so judgmental of other parents of my generation. I think I'm better than all of them for a lot of different reasons. And it's arrogant as that is. But one of the things I'm arrogant about is controlling them. And here's the reason why. When we were growing up, I won't speak for you, but I worked very, very hard to find one photograph of a woman who might be even partially naked. It might take me hours. I would go through the library to find a National Geographic where some woman's part of her culture. And that would be enough for me, because I would put a Playboy inside another magazine at the bookstore. You reach up to you. I would work so hard to find a naked woman. And my parents, I did it all behind their back. They never knew I was doing those things. You can't control. The point is, all you have to do now as a child.
You and I had to do that in bookstores.
It's crazy to think that you as a parent are going to prevent your kid.
No parental control you can put on your kid's phone that won't allow that to happen.
Even if you put a control on the phone, you're way too, you don't have if your kid is smart, there's a backup screen.
There's a workaround for everything.
There's a backup screen. I know 3 kids, I'll just say for a fact, that had iPads between their mattresses, the way we used to put Playboy. They have another screen. You're not controlling them no matter how.
So do we want to, in the same way that you're telling the story about your own youth, would we rather, knowing that they're going to get access to whatever they want access to, would you rather not be in a conversation where you have some degree of ability to curate, participate in, offer context around?
Yes. What, as a parent and even as a kid, wouldn't you want a book that the vast majority of it is about coming of age and there's one sex scene because sex is part of life, as opposed to thinking that everything is a milking video? You're too sophisticated to even know what a milking video is, Velshi, but it's grotesque and I love it. The point is, you can find whatever you want on the internet. These books have context about life.
That's what all these books that are banned are about. They get banned because they're obscene and they have sex and they have gay sex or they have sexual assault. But you know what? When you read Laurie Halse Anderson speak about sexual assault, it's not gratuitous. It's actually about young people experiencing sexual assault, which, by the way, happens. When you read All Boys Aren't Blue, it's about young men having sex at an age where someone who's experimenting with sex, who might be gay, is going through that experience. Now, we were in a world where there were no books about that. Now there are. There were no books about people who are young who are being sexually assaulted. Now there are. There were no books about kids who got sent for conversion therapy by their parents, their religious parents, because they were gay. Now there are. These books save lives because a kid who thought he was on the outside, who was weird, who thought they were damaged goods and were never going to have a good life, now have a book in which they can say, wow, I'm not alone in this thing. How much? But yes, they all have sex in them. They all have sex in them. Romeo and Juliet, you can't give as a set work in Florida anymore. You can only read excerpts. Romeo and Juliet, without the context, it's not Romeo and Juliet. It doesn't make sense.
They were teenagers having sexual relations, sir.
That's the point. That's the problem. The Tempest is held off. Toni Morrison's books are banned in some places. Margaret Atwood's books are always banned. They've been banned since 1985 in a whole bunch of places. And yet, Margaret Atwood's book seems like a play or a screenplay of what's happening right now in America. Go to Alabama, looks a whole lot like Handmaid's Tale.
I'll let you go on this thoughtful question. Your show often makes me emotional. I cry while watching your show sometimes. I'm putting you on the spot. Give me a moment, whether you were on location covering some terrible thing, a war, or just in studio and you're interviewing one of these authors where you felt really emotionally moved, and just share that with me. I thought that would be an interesting thing.
My executive producer, Rebecca, will often tell me, said that got you choked up. It happens more often than you think.
Yeah, it does. I love it. I think it's important.
But in Ukraine, when the war broke out, I think I might have cried every day. I think I might have cried every single day. I remember very particularly the day, it was, I think, April 1st. It was about 3 months into the war, and the Russians had just left the suburbs of Kyiv, and we got to those towns of Hostomel and Bucha, and the imagery came in from there, and I cried. I mean, when I saw what people will still do to people for no reason, I live near the JCC in New York, and it talks about learning from our lessons in the past and never again. It's like the BS statement, because we don't ever learn the never again part, right? We think of the Holocaust, and we will never let people just kill people because of who they are for no particular reason, but we do. Yeah. And I saw that happen, and that the cruelty that humanity can have toward each other makes me cry. But you know what? The other side makes me cry too, the strength of the human spirit. Yeah. When I meet people who survived that, who survived hurricanes, who survived tornadoes. I'm often at a house where somebody's that's been destroyed before the homeowner gets to the house. So I'm there when they arrive. Never seen anything like it in my life. The strength of the human spirit makes me cry as much as the cruelty of the human spirit does.
Thank you very much for sharing that and for joining me. As always, I really appreciate you. I'll plug everything again on the way out. And what can I tell you? It's so great to connect with you whenever I do. I miss you, pal. I love seeing you.
We'll be friends for a long time, my friend. Thank you.
I have a fantasy that someday it's like high school. You go to your, because we worked together for a while at CNN. I would see you regularly, let's say, at CNN, especially.
Yeah, it doesn't happen so much anymore.
Well, it's like high school.
You live in a cabin in the woods now, as far as I can tell.
I live in a cabin down by the river, and soon a van. Like I'm gonna go mobile with this shed. And I love it. I miss corporate media. I miss the live aspect of radio for sure. I miss people in a lot of ways. But this is such a great thing, too. And getting to interview people like you still is a real.
It's a great service. Always smart. I'm always smarter for it.
All right, bud. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Got it. Thank you very much, pal.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Yep. I appreciate you.
All right, there he goes. How about it? Ali Velshi. Please go let him know that you heard him here on the show. You can hit him on all the social medias where he lives, and I am so grateful and thankful that he joined me on the program whenever he does. He's really one of the best, both on air and off air, and I love him. So please let him know that you heard him. That's all I've got for you. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout. John Carroll, take us out right now.
up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand